Hello. Okay, I have set the timer. Now it's just time to show the game. Perfect. Okay, so last time I wrote up a summary. Okay, so last time Shinjo Takeshi found that Tokyo AH General Hospital secret basement was cleared out of all the patients and the computers. Yamazoe Uki revealed her psychic power, which is she thinks it makes people's dreams quote unquote reality. And now she's living at the Aoba Clinic. Also, she's supposed to be 12 years old, but it seems like being a gigalomaniac has halted her growth, maybe? She looks like she's much younger. Kunosato is still an asshole. Miyashiro Takuru learned how to use his telekinetic power. The newspaper club plus Arimura Hinae all wonder if Minamisawa Senri, who was reported dead after the Shibuya Earthquake and is a pyrokinetic, is the serial killer. And Takuru is currently under psychic attack at Cafe LAX. So that should be it. Let's jump in. For the next few hours. Chapter 8, Betrayal. I gritted my teeth to keep myself from screaming and ran back into the cafe. I closed the door as quietly as I could. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm so scared. She's going to kill me. 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 Minamisawa Senri is going to kill me. I tried to scream for help, but my voice got caught in my throat. No, even if I'd been able to scream, no one was there to help me. Kurusu was gone, Serika was gone, Sorito, Arimura, Kazuki, and Yamazoe. Even the waitress had disappeared, and the lighting seemed to have turned into a more faded yellow, too. The cafe was much darker than usual. I was too scared to speak or do anything except slowly move backward, away from the door. Finally, I hit the wall and found myself with nowhere to run. I could knock her flames away again. I tried desperately to psych myself up for the fight. But it was nowhere in sight. The D-sword didn't appear. No matter how much I tried to concentrate, the terror went out, and my D-sword refused to appear. I could hear the loud clicking of a heel against the floor past the entrance to the cafe, and the sound of a leg sliding along the ground. She was coming to bring me a merciless death. I looked around and saw a door on the other side of the kitchen. It was the employee bathroom. I flung myself away from the wall, ripped open the door, and went inside. Then I locked the door with my shaking hands. There were no windows inside the bathroom. I'd run inside without even bothering to turn on the lights, so it was a pitch black. In that cramped, enclosed space, my heart started to pound fast, and my breathing became heavy. She was going to hear me. I need to be quiet. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle the sound. It hurt to breathe, but if I couldn't be quiet, she'd find me and kill me. Minamisawa Senri's footsteps finally reached this floor, and then she suddenly stopped. All I could hear now was an eerie silence. I could almost sense somehow that she was looking for me. Just go away! Leave me alone! I prayed, but it was a waste of time. She came inside the cafe. The footsteps started again. Slowly, slowly. The woman slowly moved around the cafe. I could hear her dragging her leg from one side of the cafe to the other, as if she was toying with me. Each time she moved, she knocked glasses and cups to the floor where they shattered. All I could do was try not to scream. I remembered all the horrible ways the other psychics had died. Don't Look, Audio Bleed, Revolving Dead. That one. Just like the others, would anguish be the last thing I felt as they stripped away my humanity and brutalized my body? No, I don't want to die like that! How much time had passed after that? I didn't know. Suddenly, Minamisawa Senri's footsteps started to get farther and farther away. I couldn't tell from here, but it felt like she might be about to leave. I concentrated as hard as I could on listening to those eerie footsteps. I could hear a door open and close, and then that awful dragging sound again, this time going down the stairs. And soon after, there was no sound at all. I panted in relief. I did it. I'm not going to be a victim of the return of New Gen madness after all. Oh, it's the knocking. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was so utterly unexpected that I couldn't stop myself from screaming. The knocking stopped for an instant. I could sense that someone was looking at me from the other side of the flimsy door. The knocking started again. And slowly but steadily, it continued. The interval between each knock was identical and mechanical. Knock, 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 knock. I tried to get as far away from the door as I could. But the bathroom was tiny and there was nowhere to run. I won't let her just kill me. I'll catch her my damn self. Can I really be a pyrokinetic with my bare hands? The thought flashed in my mind for an instant. But I knew I couldn't take the terror anymore. I was at my limit. I screamed, unlocked the door, and slammed into it as hard as I could. The bathroom door opened with a bang. Oh! Oh no! Overcome with terror, I screamed and slammed the person in front of me to the floor. But at the last minute, someone grabbed my head from the side. A pleasant scent that I knew well filled my nose. Huh? Kurusu was right next to me, holding me. And That's a weird thing to say. The person I had knocked to the floor was Serika. If I had hit her any harder, I would have badly hurt her.
Miyashiro senpai, すっげえ大胆。こんな場所でセリの初めてを奪おうとするなんて。
違う。そんなことより。
I shook off Kurusu's arm and stood up.
あの女は。
あの女？
Everyone looked confused. Serika stood up, rubbed her butt, and started to look around the room.
あの女って誰？
だから今ここにいたろ。僕を殺そうとして。
あ？どこって、ずっとここにいたぞ。
Ito stood up from the sofa by the window. Yamazoe and Kazuki were sitting next to him with surprised looks on their faces.
なあ、お主ら、少しばかり騒がしいの。これ以上迷惑になるようなら、即刻出て行ってもらうが。
Even the waitress was here too.
そんな。確かに僕は襲われたんだ。しかも店には誰もいなくて。
Was that just a dream?
いや、違う。夢なんかじゃない。何もかもリアルだった。
I could still remember the sound of her leg dragging and the sound of the knocking at the door. Just thinking of them made me shiver.
ってことは、これもあの女の南沢千里の能力なのか。偽のカフェラックスを作り出し、僕だけを閉じ込めて。
It's more likely that it was another person rather than her being overpowered.
いや、それとも。
I thought she was a pyrokinetic. Could she do that as well?
彼女の手助けをしている能力者がいるのか。
Either way, the possibility we discussed at the newspaper club meeting was right, and in a bad way.
ちょっと大丈夫、タクル。ひどい汗よ。
Kurusu took out a handkerchief from her pocket and started to gently wipe the sweat off my forehead. But her hand suddenly froze. She looked at me, her face pale.
タクル、あなた、目から血が。
I put my hands up to my eyes, surprised. When I tried to rub them, I felt something slick. And when I looked at my hands, they were bright red. I could see my blood on her handkerchief too. Had I been so scared and tense that the blood vessels around my eyes had burst?
どうしたのそれ？
大丈夫か、宮代。
父さんに見てもらわなきゃ。
I'm willing to bet that if they did another MRI of his brain, it would be a little swollen.
行こう、タク。
Kurusu and Serika tried to drag me out of the cafe. I could see Ito, Arimura, Kazuki, and Yamazoe in the corner of my eye, trying to figure out what to do. I turned to them and said,
伊藤、有村、和樹、山添、お前たちも一緒に。
はい。私もいいんですか？こんな時間に？
遠慮なんかしてる場合じゃない。能力者がターゲットにされてるのは間違いないんだ。今日が終わるまでとにかく離れちゃダメだ。
We left Cafe LAX and headed for Aoba Clinic.
はあ、特に目に異常はねえな。角膜も綺麗なもんだし、血圧もほぼ正常と。
Dad nodded as he looked at me.
頭痛はするか？体のどこかがしびれるとかは？
特には。
視界の一部が欠けてたり、狭くなったりもしてないな。
うん。
そっか。なら大丈夫だ。
本当に？もっとよく見て。
Kurusu was sitting next to me, worried.
さっきからそればっかだな、お前。
だって。
まぶたの裏に血管があって、 稀にそれが切れることがある。ひどい緊張や興奮をして力が入ったり踏ん張ったりするとな。覚えがないか、タクル。
I remembered the attack at Cafe LAX and shivered, but I nodded before Dad could see.
だろう、それが原因だよ。心配ない。
Dad called up my chart on the computer, the same one he'd been using since I was in a coma. He started to type something.
おいおい、ノノ。そんなおっかない顔で睨む。
タクルに何かあったらどうする気？
わかったわかった。
Dad stopped typing and opened another page on the chart.
タクル、紹介状書いてやるから、明日また頭の中の写真撮ってこい。
Let's see if my prediction is right. That there's gonna be some swelling in his brain.
でも
いいからいいかって。可愛い娘が怒って口聞いてくれなくなったら困るんだよ。
Dad wrote me another referral to the same hospital as before, which was finally enough to satisfy Nono.
ああ、そうだ、ノノ。お前、自分もまだ病み上がりだってこと忘れんなよ。
あ、そうね。ごめんなさい。
分かってりゃいい。
Dad smiled. Kurusu and I thanked Dad, then went up to the dining room where the rest of the group was waiting.
ああ、ウキ。私アップルティー。私も。わかりました。伊藤さんは？
コーヒーブラックで。
When we got to the dining room, Yamazoe was wandering around getting drinks for everyone. I looked at the clock and it was almost 11 o'clock p.m. There was just one more hour until October 23rd was over.
で、さっき何があったのかちゃんと説明してくれるんですよね、宮代先輩。
Arimura looked at me as she sipped her apple tea. She had the same joking voice she used at school, but her eyes were serious. She seemed to have come up with her own ideas on what might have happened to me, and her eyes were as gloomy as they were when we'd first met.
話すよ。例のパイロキネシストのことだから。
Oh, that reminds me that Arimura's eyes were also bleeding when she was psychically attacked. Same symptoms.
南沢千里。
I glanced at Kurusu just for a second. I thought she wouldn't want to hear that her old friend might be a serial killer.
クルス、もし嫌なら自分の部屋に戻っててくれ。父さんかユイのところへ行っててもいいし。
ちゃんと聞かせて。
クルス、
聞きたいの。だからここにいる。
そっか。じゃあ。
I sat down in a chair at the dinner table and, after a moment's hesitation, slowly began to describe what happened to me at Cafe LAX. Oh. As I talked, the terror started to come back to me and my hands were soon covered in a nasty sweat. I didn't want to look bad in front of everyone, but I couldn't stop my voice from shaking.
それでその後は知っての通りだ。ドアを飛び出したら外はいつも通りのカフェに戻ってた。
There was silence for a moment after I finished. Arimura especially seemed to be lost in thought, as they all made anime noises. That was, of course, because Minamisawa Senri was probably after me, her, or Yamazoe.
殺されてたまるか。
She whispered that in a low voice, and suddenly stuck her hand out into the air.
おい。
Yamazoe and I moved away, surprised. Arimura had suddenly drawn her D sword.
お前、何を。
決まってるでしょ。武器ですよ。
武器？
あんたも出せるんだよね、ウキ。もしあいつが現れたら戦う。手伝いなさい。戦うって 私そんな。いいから早く。
Yamazoe tried to shake her head to say no, but when Arimura glared at her threateningly, she bit her lip. And then she reached out her hand. A giant sword appeared in her hand, too.
Miyashiro senpaiも早く。
そんなこと急に言われてもどうやって抜いたらいいかわからないんだそれ。
役に立ちませんね。
I could hear how annoyed she was. It had been a long time since I'd seen her act this cold.
ねえ、何？どうしたの？
一体何の話してんだよ。
The others couldn't see the D sword. All they saw was Yamazoe and I freaking out.
私たちこの前、南沢千里に襲われました。そして今日も、こんなのもう我慢できない。だから。
Arimura looked at the sword in her hands and cackled.
この手で事件を終わらせてやります。南沢千里を殺して。ちょっと待って。
Everyone turned to look at Kurusu. She probably knew that she was getting too emotional about the situation because she was hesitating more than I'd ever seen before.
あのね、千里が犯人って、本当の。
証拠はまだあの ID カードと僕らの証言しかない。けど
慰霊碑にはあの子の名前がちゃんとあるのよ。それは何かのミスじゃないですか。A1 東京総合病院のデータでは行方不明になっていたんですよね。けど私見たんだもの。私の目の前で千里は瓦礫に潰されて。
She must have been remembering something painful. She put her hands to her chest and her nails dug in deep. But then, Arimura raised her eyebrows so high that I could see it from here.
クルス先輩。
Oh!
どうして嘘をつくんですか？
Ah, she forgot! Oh shit! She forgot that Arimura is a human lie detector. And then I guess she told a lie. She didn't see Cindy crushed to death in front of her. That's interesting. That might be why the police and everything seem to think that Minamisawa Senri is dead. Maybe Kurusu lied and said that she died.
Eh?
Huh?
Shocked, I glanced at them from one to the other. Arimura was staring at Kurusu with suspicious eyes. But Kurusu's expression remains unchanged, to the point where it almost seems unnatural. As if she was trying to control her facial expression so that she, Uso. Arimura's power allowed her to tell when someone was lying. In other words, Kurusu was definitely lying right now. But Kurusu looked Arimura dead in the eye as she spoke.
嘘なんかじゃないわ。いいえ、先輩は南沢千里が死んだところを見ていません。あなたの能力というのがどのくらい正確なのか私は知らない。けれど彼女はもうこの世にはいないわ。そう信じたいだけじゃないんですか？あるいは南沢千里が実は生きているのを知っているとか。
The two of them glared at each other.
もし仮に。はい。仮に千里が生き延びていたとしても、あの子に殺人なんてできるはずがない。
Kurusu's voice took on a sorrowful note.
千里はとっても臆病な子だった。小さな虫を殺すこともできないくらい気が弱くて、何かあるとすぐに泣きべそをかいて、だからいつも誰かの後をついて回っていたわ。もちろん暴力なんて嫌いだったし、血を見るのすら苦手だった。そんな千里が猟奇殺人なんて、私にはどうしても納得がいかない。ありえないわ。どうやら 今度は本当のことを言っているようですね。だから
Kurusu's voice was rarely this emotional, but she must have realized that nothing else she said would matter, so she fell silent.
とにかく千里が犯人じゃないとしたら、タクルたちの憶測は完全に間違ってしまっているわ。真犯人が他にいたらどうする気なの？
それは。
Of course, I'd thought about that possibility, that there might be multiple killers, that there might be another psychic working with Minamisawa Senri.
でも、だとしても、今日が終わるまでに誰も殺されなければ、僕らの。
Yui? Everyone leapt out of their chairs as we heard a scream from downstairs. Was that Yui's voice? Yui! Kurusu ran down the stairs. We followed right after her. What? Yui had fallen backward onto the ground near the front desk. Her face was pale and her teeth were chattering.
お姉ちゃん、ねえ、どうしたの？
ユイ、大丈夫か？ユイ。
Yuto and Dad grabbed her and held her tight, but she was still shaking. The terror had completely consumed her.
何があったの？ユイ。お姉ちゃん、しっかりしなさい。
Kurusu grabbed her cheeks and yelled.
私、寝ようと思って。
おやすみなさい。父さんも無理しないで、もう寝たら？
そう思うんだったら、ノノに意見しといてくれ。あいつのせいで余計な仕事が一つ増えたんだよ。
ノノ姉はタクル兄のことになると人が変わるから。
違いねえな。じゃ、おやすみ。
うん、おやすみ。それで私部屋へ戻ろうとして診察室を出たんだけど、その時玄関のドアから音が。
A knocking?
ノックの音が。私休館の人かなって思って、それで。すみません、今日の診察は終わりなんです。休館でしたら夜間診療のある病院をご紹介しますけど。どうなさいました？救急車呼んだ方がいいですか？一体何なんですか？いたずらならやめてください。だからやめてください。私ものすごく怖くなって。だけど外見たら。
Oh.
もう大丈夫。大丈夫よ、ユイ。
Kurusu gently rubbed her head, and at last the dam burst and Yui started to cry. Everyone looked at each other, pale, as we listened to her sob. Arimura and I in particular had gone as deathly white as Yui. Knocking. It was the same thing I'd heard at the cafe.
やっぱり追いかけてきたんだ。
I could feel my knees shaking. I remember the knocking and the dragging footsteps I'd heard at the cafe, and my heart began to feel overwhelmed with terror. I felt an impulse to run screaming off into the night. But strangely enough, it was Arimura who gave in before I did. She gritted her teeth so hard that I could hear it from where I was standing, and then ran toward the front entrance.
おい、有村。
ひなちゃん。
She yanked open the lock on the door and then flung it open. Then she ran out into the street, flailing her D-sword.
南沢千里、私はここにいる。くだらない小細工なんかやめて、さっさと殺しに来いよ。
She kept swinging her D-sword at the shadows formed by the streetlights.
私はもう逃げも隠れもしない。殺せるもんなら殺してみろって言ってんだ。
やめろ、有村。何やってるんだよ。
I grabbed Arimura from behind. She'd clearly gone crazy. Her D-sword hadn't been real booted yet, so it just slid right through me. If it had been real booted, I wouldn't have survived.
やだ、離して。殺されるのは嫌。
落ち着け。あいつは僕らがパニックになるのを狙ってるんだ。冷静にならなきゃ負けだ。
なんでこんな目に遭わなきゃならないの。能力なんてなければよかった。こんなものさえなければ。
When I saw her, I realized that I'd been making a mistake. For a while now, I thought that I was starting to understand Arimura, but I was wrong. A bratty know-it-all, a normal girl who sometimes got excited and wore a childlike smile. I was always surprised when she did, but I also told myself that was who she really was. But I was wrong. She was a weak little girl whose fate was caught up in events far beyond her control.
そうだ。能力なんてなければ、誰もこんなことに巻き込まれることはなかった。
No one would have been killed, and no one would have been tortured in those experiments in that basement. I hated myself for ever being proud of my powers. Why did they even exist? Who gave me these? And why? Harimura's body was shaking as I held her, and pathetically enough, I was shaking every bit as much.
おい、Miyashiro! Arimura!
Ito ran up to us as we sat on the side of the road. Serika, Yamazoe, and Kazuki ran after him.
大丈夫か？
なんとか落ち着いた。
I lied so as not to worry them.
それより部屋へ戻ろう。ここにいたら危ない。いつ襲われるか。
And then Ito cut me off and showed me his phone. I flinched away.
まさか、また正体不明の電話がかかってきたのか。
Ito must have guessed what I was thinking because he quickly shook his head.
違う。よく見ろ、Miyashiro。
え？
I stared at the phone. It had the usual wallpaper, the usual apps. There was nothing out of the ordinary.
気がついたか？
尾上、お前のも見せてくれ。
Serika took her phone out of her pocket and showed it to me. It showed the same thing that Ito's did. The present time and date, 12:03 a.m., October 24th. October 23rd was over.
助かったのか。
Arimura swung her head around and yanked the phone out of Serika's hands. Her fingers were shaking too much to read what it said. She stared at it again and again, and then... All the strength drained from her tiny body as she collapsed onto me. And then, she passed out. October 23rd, the day of the return of the new gen madness. We'd managed to survive it. Kazuki got into her usual gaming position and stretched. She was about to start playing ESO too. I chuckled as I opened the lid of my lunchbox. Everything was starting to return to normal. Inside the lunchbox was a sandwich that Kurosu had made for me. Morning had come. It was a Saturday, but it was the one day of the month we went to school on a weekend. We'd gotten some sleep at Aoba dorm, then took showers and came to school. Yui and Arimura still hadn't woken up and were staying at Aoba Clinic. But neither of them seemed hurt, and Kunosato and Uki were staying home to take care of them. For my part, I'd skipped out on morning classes to stop by the brain doctor that Dad had referred me to. The results had been the same as Dad had said, no abnormalities in the blood vessels in my brain. When I told Kurosu over the phone, she sounded relieved. Oh, so no swelling either? Damn, there goes my theory. I wasn't feeling hungry, but I didn't want to let the sandwich go to waste. I took a little nibble of it as I stared at the board on the wall.
これで本当に終わったのか。ニュージェネの狂気の再来は。
No, we have like 3 more chapters to go, so. For the common route. The net had been in an uproar last night. No, it still was. But not because something had happened. In fact, the uproar was because nothing had happened. I checked a bunch of different places. TV, radio, and even the newspaper. But nothing happened on the 23rd that would make you think of the new gen madness. There were all kinds of rumors going around on the net. This included a weird conspiracy theory that the killer had been captured, but because he was the son of a major politician, they couldn't go public with it. But most people thought that the return of the new generation madness was dead now that nothing had happened on the 23rd.
Oh, Miyashiro! 病院はもういいのか？
ああ、おかげさまで異常なしだってさ。
よかったね。
Ito and Serika were both carrying lunchboxes of their own. Kuritsu had made their lunches this morning, just like she had made mine.
けど、登校するなり部室に直行してランチとか、いいご身分だな、おい。
授業は午後からでいいって言われたからさ。それに、マップを見ながらいろいろ考えてみようと思って。
これ以上何もするなって、今朝新庄さんに言われたろ。
When we told Shinjo-san that there had been another attack by the person we believed to be Minamisawa Senri, he demanded to know why we hadn't told him sooner. And then he insisted that we never do anything so dangerous again.
でも考えるくらいならいいだろう。
I put the lid back on my lunch, having barely eaten any of it at all, and I looked back at the map.
昨日僕たちはカフェラックスにいた。そこで事件が起こった。僕の前に現れたのは以前襲ってきたあの女だった。
Minamisawa Senri.
そしてその能力は
pyrokinetic.
ところがカフェラックスで僕を襲ったのはパイロキネシスじゃなく別の能力だった。それは
Showed me a delusion of being alone.
ってことは、やっぱり南沢千里は一人で2つの能力を持ってるって推測が正しいのかな。
いや、まだ確証は持てない。別の能力者が協力している可能性を否定できないし。
それで襲われた時の緊張のせいでタクがまぶたの血管を切っちゃって、結局みんなで青葉寮へ移動したんだよね。
ああ、僕はそこで父さんの診察を受けて、その後みんなで23日が過ぎるのを待ってた。
そういえばさ、あの時副部長と有村なんか言い争いとかしてなかったか？
言い争い？
あ、そういえば
Nono said she didn't believe Senri was the killer.
そうそう、のんちゃんがね、南沢千里さんは絶対に犯人じゃないって言ったんだよ。
猟奇殺人なんてできる子じゃないって言ってたな。昔親友だったからわかるって。
でもさ、あの時に有村は副部長が嘘をついてるって指摘したんだよ。あれってどういうことだと思う？
確かあの時有村が嘘だと指摘したのは
It was a lie that she saw Minamisawa Senri die in the earthquake. He's gonna put that on the board.
思い出した。クレスは南沢千里が目の前で死ぬのを見たって言ったんだけど、それが嘘だったんだ。つまり死んだところを見てない。
きっとのんちゃんはね、
親友だった子が犯人扱いされてるのが許せなかったんだよ。それでとっさに嘘をついちゃったんだと思うんだ。
まあ確かに副部長の気持ちになってみりゃな。
そうだな。やっぱり南沢千里の話題はクルスがいるときは少し気を使った方がいいな。
I stuck a paper up on the board.
そして問題はその後か。
あ
あ。アウバ委員の1階でユイが
ドアがノックされるのを聞いたんだよね。
It was the same thing I'd heard at Cafe LAX, that woman's knock. And Yui had seen a terrifying sight.
僕でさえカフェであれだけ恐怖したんだ。何も知らないユイはさぞかし怖かっただろうな。
うん。かわいそう。
Fortunately, Yui didn't open the door. She quickly shut it and locked it, and saved us at the last minute. But if she'd opened the door all the way...
いや、待てよ。
I looked up from the map toward the ceiling. Something seemed very wrong.
お？どうしたの？タク。
なんか思い出したのか？
Sarika and Ito looked at me, confused.
いや、なんか引っかかった。ものすごく大変なことを見落としてる気がする。
I wonder what it is. Missed something really important? Huh? No, wait. Open the door all the way. I don't know.
ん？
Even Katsuki was surprised enough that she turned away from ESO2 to look at me.
大変なこと？
ああ、昨夜はいろんなことがあって、有村がパニクったり、僕も気が動転してて気づかなかったけど。
That's right. What did I just think to myself? If Yui had opened the door.
当然、これまでの事件から考えれば、ユイも被害者に。
Oh!
でも、それって。
That would mean that she's also a psychic. Because why else would they target her?
それってつまり。
I looked at the map again.
前にも話したけど、今回の事件には一つ明らかに共通する特徴があったよな。
って言うと？
それは被害者だ。最初の事件、こっちみんな。被害者、次は音漏れたん。被害者、僕が目撃した回転デッド。被害者とその特徴、そして学園祭で起きたごっつぁんです。被害者とその特徴は、そう、事件のターゲットになっている被害者は全員能力者だ。それ以外は襲われていない。だからこそ僕や有村山添はずっと警戒していたわけだし、事実カフェラックスでは僕がターゲットにされた。でもアウバ寮に現れた南沢千里が襲撃しようとしたのは
Yui.
そう、ユイだ。
I stood up in shock.
まさかそんな。
ゆいちゃんもってこと？
マジかよ。
It was far too late for it to make a difference now, but I suddenly felt like a pillar of ice was pressed up against my back. I was certain that Minamisawa Senri had come to Aoba Clinic in search of me, Arimura, or Yamazoe, and that Yui had only been caught up in it at all because she was unlucky enough to answer the door. But what if I was wrong? What if there was a reason she was after Yui? I sighed. It was hard for me to really believe.
これから確かめてくる。あいつが本当に能力者なのかどうか。あ、悪い。起こしちゃったな。
あれ？タクルに学校は？
早退した。お前のこと気になってさ。
またまた。
Yui slowly sat up from the bed and smiled a tired smile. She must have felt dizzy for a moment because she leaned forward and grabbed her forehead. Her face was still pale, and the ivy looked like it was painful.
いいからそのまま寝てろって。
でも
クルスに言いつけるぞ。
Those were always the best words to use on Yui. She frowned for a second, but then lay down and pulled up the covers.
有村は
The other bed in the examination room was empty.
お昼頃新庄さんって刑事さんが来て二人で出かけていった。
Shinjo-san was probably asking her about what happened last night.
あいつもう体は大丈夫なのか？
元気だったみたい。
そっか。
タクル兄にね、ありがとうって伝えてくれって。
My eyes went wide as I looked at my foster sister. Arimura said thanks?
何かの聞き間違いだろ。
そんなことないよ。いい人だよ、有村さん。タクル兄にもちゃんと感謝してると思うけど。
聞き間違いじゃなきゃただの気の迷いだな。
I pulled a stool up to Yui's bed and sat down, and then I watched her as she was lying under the covers. It might have been the first time I'd looked at her like this, come to think of it. Does she really have some kind of power? It just seemed hard to believe. Maybe I was mistaken? I hoped that I was. People were saying that the killings were over and that the return of the new gen madness was at its end, but the killer still hadn't been caught. The idea of the killer being after not just me, Arimura, and Yamazoe, but also Yui was too scary to contemplate.
何？どうしたの？
As I tried to figure out the best way to explain things, I heard a very uncomfortable voice. She must have noticed that I was staring at her silently. My sister was looking at me in confusion.
あのな。
あら、タクル。
おかえりなさい。
まだおかえりなさいっていう時間じゃないでしょ。
Kurusu was standing at the door, holding a tray with a bowl of rice porridge. Yamazoe was next to her with a pair of spare pajamas. Kurusu put the tray next to the bed and looked at me, concerned.
学校早退したの？どこか具合でも？
ごめん、そうじゃなくて、ちょっと気になることがあってさ。
気になること？
Even if Yui was a psychic, I still wasn't sure if I should tell Kurusu about it. She'd just worry more. But she cared about her sister. I knew that. It was probably better if she knew everything.
どうすれば確かめられるかな。
And then I remembered the method that Kunosato-san had used on me. I glanced at Yamazoe. She probably wouldn't like it, but it was the only way I could think of.
なあ、ユイ。ゆうべのことをあんまり思い出したくないと思うけどさ。有村とそこにいる山添が手に何か持っているのを見なかったか？
Kurusu and Yamazoe were shocked too.
何かって？
二人は剣のようなものを持っていたんじゃないか？
剣。
ねえ、タクル。あなた何を言ってるの？
Kurusu grabbed me by the arm. She couldn't see a D sword herself, but she knew exactly what I was asking.
ユイ、そんなの見てないわよね。
見てない。知らない。
Yui must have been surprised by Kurusu's sudden outburst, but it was obvious she was telling a lie. I could see from the look on her face that she thought she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see.
山添、ごめん。お前が嫌なこと頼んでもいいか？もしもユイがそうなら、犯人が逮捕されるまで、お前や有村と同じように僕が守らないといけないから。
はい。
Yamazoe was surprised, but she seemed willing to help her old friend. She put the pajamas on the bed and stretched her hand out into empty air.
ユイさん、見ていてね。
ウキちゃん、ダメ、やめて。
Kurusu let go of my arm and grabbed onto Yui, as if she was trying to stop Yui from seeing it.
クルス、ごめん。でも手遅れになってからじゃ遅いんだ。だから。ほら、見えるだろユイ。山添の手に何があるか。
Uki slowly drew it out of thin air, as it shone with a light no normal person could see. It was a weapon that connected reality to direct sea in its ocean of negative energy, a D sword. It was obvious that Yui's eyes were following Yuki's sword.
見えるのゆい。見えるの
Yui looked like she was about to cry. Then she nodded, slowly.
山添、もういい。ありがとう。
The D sword disappeared from Yuki's hands. There was nothing left but an awkward silence.
そんな。
I was right. Yui is a psychic, and Minamisawa Senri almost killed her last night. October 24th, 2015, Saturday.
この匂い、どこかで。
That was the first thing Shinjo thought as he ducked under the crime scene tape and went inside the third floor condo. He knew this smell. But from where?
あ、そうだ。ニューヨークで。
When he was training in America, a local colleague had taken him to a cheap steakhouse. The waiter had brought him a disgusting grilled lamb steak. The smell was a mix of rotting animal blood and burnt fat. He hadn't even taken a single bite. And that was precisely the smell that filled the room right now. The source of the stench was in the middle of the room, on top of the dinner table. Oh shit! It's a dead body? Another person died last night and they didn't broadcast it? They didn't publicize it? Okay. The forensics people must have finished their job because it already had a sheet placed over it. Now, it was just waiting to be carried out to the coroner. Shinjo put his hands together for a moment in silent prayer, and then flipped up the sheet. The second he saw it, he yanked the handkerchief out of his pocket and forced it to his mouth to stop himself from throwing up. He knew it was disrespectful to the dead, but he couldn't help it.
ご苦労様です、新庄先輩。
So this must say Keiji. He looked up and saw a younger detective talking to the forensics people. The detective lacked his usual energy. This was probably the worst case he'd ever seen. Shinjo didn't want to look bad in front of the younger kid, so he forced the handkerchief away from his mouth.
あ、ご苦労。ガイシャの身元ははっきりしたかい？
それがですね、衣服を着用していない上に遺体の損壊が激しくて、今のところ確実なのは10代から30代の女性ってことしか。
He could see hints on the charred flesh that indicated the body had once belonged to a woman. But the face was so burnt that there was no way to distinguish any features. And what was even stranger was that it looked like a metal stick coming out of her mouth. The rod came out all the way below her abdomen, like a skewer used to cook a kebab.
10日ほど前でしょうか。近くの工事現場から鉄筋が盗まれたっていう届けが出てるそうです。
The detective flipped open his notepad.
鉄筋っていうとあれか。コンクリートの壁に使う？
ええ。ガイシャの口から出てるのがそれのようです。
そういえば昔こんな映画があったな。
It was an old 80s horror flick that he'd seen with some friends in college. The movie was about a bunch of travelers who got lost in the jungle and eaten by cannibals. In one scene, someone had been cooked like this. And there was one more thing. The horrific scene in front of him called to mind a number of other incidents he'd seen in recent times. Indeed, it was without question that he was reminded of the return of the new gen madness.
まさかこれも？いや、でも23日は。
On October 23rd, the killer had spent the whole day going after Miyashiro Takuru and his friends, which meant the target had to be one of them.
新庄さん？
あ、悪い。続けてくれ。
Shinjo put the sheet back on the body again and made another short prayer.
ガイシャの身元は未確認と言いましたが、自分の意見としては、おそらくこの部屋の住人と見て間違いないと思います。
灰田理子さんだったな。
はい。
He flipped through his notebook and relayed to Shinjo what he had learned from the condo's manager.
年齢18歳、独身で一人暮らし。職業は派遣のテレフォンサポートってことになってますが、派遣会社に確認を取ろうとしたところ、会社自体がもう存在していませんでした。
倒産したか、あるいは 水商売のためのダミー会社って可能性もあるな。
その線については今表せてます。
で、会社が彼女だと思われる根拠は？
Shinjo took out his own notebook and started to copy down the things he thought were important.
はい。契約以来、どうも本人しかこの部屋へ入った形跡がないようなんです。
ん？
鑑識からの報告では、室内から出た指紋や足跡は本人とおぼしきものだけで、不自然に拭き取った跡なども見られません。もちろん、それ以外の指紋もないわけじゃないんですが、どれも古いもので、おそらく以前の住人や業者だと思われます。鑑識も今回の件からは除外できるだろうという意見です。また、玄関の靴跡も会社のものしか見当たりません。遺体発見時、玄関には2つの鍵の他に内側からチェーンロックがかかっていました。窓もしっかり施錠されていたので、本人に間違いないこと。
A locked room murder. Shinjo felt a little like he was going to faint.
じゃあ、犯人はどうやってここに入って犯行に及んだんだ？
It would take some serious equipment to roast an entire person. You couldn't get that in here without leaving any traces. The younger detective must have been thinking the same thing.
これで普通の死に方をしててくれれば、自殺ってことで新庄さんの手をお借りすることもなかったんですけど。
死に方に普通も何もないだろ
う。すいません。
1階のエントランスに防犯カメラがあったよな。
ええ、部下が管理人室で録画のチェックを始めていますが、今のところは何も。
そうか。
Shinjo looked at the victim and then at the forensics people. They were frowning as they talked.
あの様子だと死亡時刻の推定もまだ無理そうだな。
はい、解剖に回してみないと何とも。火災報知器が作動していればすぐに分かったんでしょうが。
The two of them looked up at the useless devices on the ceiling.
壊されていたって？
はい。
誰に？いや、室内には彼女の指紋しかないんだったな。ということは本人か
？Huh. Weird. But why would she do that? Shinjo couldn't make any sense of it.
というか、新庄さん。俺、焼死の現場ってのは初めてなんですけど、こんな風に燃えるもんなんですか？
わからん。こんなの俺だって初めてだ。
鑑識の連中がね、全員首をひねってるんです。ガソリンや灯油を使ったってこんな風にはならないって。
And there was no smell of gasoline anyway. The only stench here was that of burning meat.
俺、前にテレビで見たんですけど、やっぱいいです。
言えよ、最後まで。
怒りませんか？
内容による。
世界の心霊現象スペシャルとかいう番組だったかな。そこで人体の発火現象ってのが。
やめろ、バカ。
Shinjo poked the younger detective's head lightly. The detective apologized, but Shinjo hadn't stopped him because it was too unbelievable to be true. He stopped him for the opposite reason. He was probably right. Which meant he didn't want rumors flying around, especially within the police department.
Pyrokinesis と言ったな。
Kunosato Mio, Arimura Hinae, and Miyashiro Takuru had all used that word repeatedly. It was the power to set things on fire with your mind, and they said the woman that was after Miyashiro and his friends, Minamisawa Senri, had it. Was this Haida Riko woman attacked by a pyrokinetic then? He came back to the same conclusion he reached earlier, but then Stone shook his head.
それでも説明できないか。
How did she get the rebar used to skewer the woman inside the room? And how did she actually skewer the woman herself? Shinjo looked at the large window that dominated the room's east side. The curtain was open, and he could see the chaotic city of Shibuya outside. If the building was taller, the view would be impressive, but from this height you could see the dirty backsides of the surrounding condos and multi-purpose buildings. It was hard to call it a nice view. That probably made the rent a lot cheaper though, he thought to himself as he began to examine the glass window. If the killer had used some kind of power to get the rebar in from the building across the street, this window would have been shattered. But there wasn't a scratch on it.
こいつは 俺が一人で考えてもどうにもならないな。
He hated to say it, but he needed a specialist like Kunosato Mio. So for now, he decided to focus on gathering information.
新庄さん、
A light tap on his back brought him back to reality.
防犯カメラをチェックしてた部下から連絡です。外車の顔がはっきり映ってる映像を見つけました。
そうか、行こう。
When he finally got out of the room, he felt like he could breathe again. Disrespectful to the dead or not, he took a deep breath when he got outside. He went down to the first floor and looked at the video on the monitor in the manager's room.
管理人の話だと、ハイダリコさんは必ずカメラから顔を背けるようにしていたそうなんですが。
撮られたくない理由でも？
渋谷地震の時に顔に火傷を負ったとかで、人に見られるのを極端に嫌ってたらしいですね。
Wait, they're saying Minamisawa Senri was the one who was burned alive? What the fuck? She's dead? That's weird.
ああ、それで。
And she's using an alias? Haida Riko?
ただこの時は一瞬ですが偶然映ってしまったようです。
The timestamp on the screen indicated it was late at night on the 12th of October.
10月12日？それって確か。
He remembered writing that day down, so he flipped open his notebook.
ああ、そうだ。宮代君たちが初めて南沢千里に襲われたっていう夜だな。
先輩、ハイダリコさん来ました。
He quickly turned his eye back to the screen. That's Minamisawa Senri, alright? She has the rebar? Huh. In the video, the door to the entrance opened, and a woman came staggering inside. Perhaps her leg didn't work right, or maybe she was injured, because he could tell she was dragging it. Her hair covered her face, making it impossible to read her expression.
おい、あれって。
ええ。
Shinjo and the other detective gasped. Haida Riko was holding a long object in her hands, something like a staff, and using it to support herself. It looked exactly like the iron rebar that was currently skewering her body.
まさか自分で持ち込んだ鉄筋で串刺しに。
It was just a recording, but Shinjo found himself holding his breath nervously, as if he was watching live footage. She walked right by the security camera. It did seem like she wanted to avoid showing her face. However, she must have tripped on something when she was right under the camera because she suddenly staggered. When she did, her hair flew backward and he could finally get a glimpse of her face. Shinjo's eyes went wide.
似てる。
All of her features matched the description. They were identical to the composite sketch based on a description by someone who had barely survived an attack by this woman.
そんな。こいつ。
The girl in the video was...
大丈夫よ、ユイ。安全になるまでずっと一緒にいてあげるから。ほら、元気出して。
Yui nodded. She was still pale. Not only had she gone through a lot last night, but she just found out that she was a psychic. She wasn't looking good at all. I explained to her what I thought she needed to know, and then told her that no matter what, she must never be alone from now on. It was true that the return of the new gen madness had come to a temporary halt when Minamisawa Senri hadn't been able to kill anyone on the 23rd. But no matter what the rest of the world said, it felt far too early to declare this whole thing over.
でもね、こんな時にこんなことを言うのは変かもしれないけど、お姉ちゃん、ちょっとだけワクワクしてるんだ。
え？
ユイと一緒にお風呂に入ったり、寝たりするの久しぶりなんだもの。ユイったらいつの間にか大人になっちゃって、すっかりユウとのお姉ちゃんになっちゃったでしょ。たまには私の妹に戻って甘えてくれてもいいのになんて思ってたから。
やだ、もう。
Yui smiled, just a little.
ユウとはどうするって？
父さんの部屋にしばらく居候。
この部屋で一緒に寝ていいって言ったんだけどね。なんか恥ずかしいみたい。私は別に構わないのに。
ユウはのの姉が初恋の人だから。あ、これ内緒ね。絶対ね。
それは光栄だわ。ねえねえタクル、頑張らないとユウトに私を取られちゃうわよ。
Sometimes Kurusu would say things like that just to enjoy my reaction. Lately, I'd gotten a lot better at not reacting to the way she wanted me to. I simply snorted, and she puffed up her cheeks and pouted.
で、ユイの能力なんだけど、本当に自覚とかないのか？
The small smile vanished from Yui's face.
そんなの急に言われても。
自分の身の回りで特別なことが起こったりとかさ。
特別って言うと、ユウのことくらいかな。
どんな？
ユウが嘘ついてもすぐにわかるとか。
それは超能力じゃないわね。お姉ちゃんなら普通よ。私だってタクルのついた嘘なんて簡単に見抜けるもの。
だからそこで僕を引き合いに出すなよ。
This time my don't react skill failed me. Kurusu chuckled, finally satisfied. Damn it. I felt annoyed for a moment, and then I realized that Kurusu was trying to send me a message.
なるべくユイを怖がらせないであげて。
That's what she seemed to be saying. Yeah, she was right. A normal girl like Yui would never be able to handle knowing there might be a serial killer after her. So Kurusu was deliberately pretending to be cheerful. I realized that my tone had probably been too harsh and relaxed it.
他にはないかな。どんなことでもいいんだけど。
他に？
Yui looked down and thoughtful for a moment.
そういえば、本当に時々だけど、ユウの声が聞こえる。
声？
うん。例えば、ユウが忘れ物をして困ってたり、怪我をして泣いてたり、そういう良くない声が聞こえてきて、それで急いでユウの学校へ行くと、本当に怪我をしてたりするの。
なるほど。それかもしれない。
I wasn't a specialist, so I couldn't say for sure, but maybe you could call it telepathy between siblings. Kunosato-san might know more, but for whatever reason, she had it out for us, and there was no way I was telling her about Yui.
ユウトにはそういうことはないのかしら。
大丈夫。あいつに能力はない。
I'd already checked yesterday. I'd shown him Yamazoe's D sword, and he hadn't shown any response at all.
なんだか、私はユウの心配してるのに、ユウの方はそうでもないみたいで、ちょっと癪だけど。でも、いいよね。ユウが狙われることはないんだもんね。
ああ、あいつはターゲットにされないはずだ。
When Yui heard that, she finally seemed to feel better. Kurusu softly put her hand on Yui's head and rubbed it.
本当にいい子ね、ユイは。
やだ、やめてよ。
ダメです。
Kurusu grabbed Yui before she could escape and held her tight. She looked like she was about to kiss her at any second.
ユイ好きよ、大好き。
のねがなんか気持ち悪い。助けてタクルに。
I couldn't help but smile.
気が済むまでやらせてやれよ、ユイ。
やだ、助けてよ。
Just when I thought it was safe to leave Yui with Kurusu, the three of us froze at the sudden sound of a knock.
まさか、ここ家の中だぞ。
The knock continued. It's no one. It's not the serial killer. They're traumatized by knocks now. That's sad. Kurusu stood up and positioned herself between Yui and the door. I motioned for her to step back and put my hand on the doorknob. I remembered the terror I'd felt at Cafe LAX and gulped. To be honest, I was afraid, terrified, but I was the only one who could protect them right now.
は？
Suddenly, I heard an easygoing voice come from the other side of the door.
宮代先輩、ちょっといいっすか？それともクルス先輩となんかまずいことでもしてますか？
ってお前かよ。
あ、
どうもじゃない。紛らわしいからノックすんなよ。
そういうわけにはいきませんってば。変な場面とか見ちゃったらどうするんです？
僕とクルスで変な場面なんてないからな。で、なんか用か？
あ、はい。ちょっと宮代先輩に話があるんで、いいですかね？
僕に？
ダイニングに来てもらっても。
ああ、構わないけど。
私たちも行った方がいいかしら。
Kurusu poked her face out from behind me and asked. Arimura stuck her hands out and shook them in what looked like to me a deliberate overreaction.
いえいえ、クルス先輩と立花姉はそのままラブラブしてて OK っすよ。話って宮代先輩にだけなんで。そう？
Arimura said her usual adios, gracias to a confused Kurusu, then dragged me out of the room.
なんだよ一体。
クルス先輩にはまだちょっとな話なんで。とにかく来てください。見てほしいもの。
Oh, things are serious again. I followed Arimura as she hurried away from Kurusu's room.
タク、ゆいちゃんどう？
うん、もう大丈夫だと思う。落ち着いたよ。
そっか、よかったね。
Yamazoe was in the kitchen washing dishes. She looked at us. She let out a small sigh of relief. Even if Yamazoe hadn't seen her for a long time, Yui was still her friend, and she was still worried about her.
ひなちゃん、お茶飲む？ウキちゃんが入れてくれたのはとっても美味しいよ。
ああ、いえ、私はそろそろ家に帰ろうと思ってるんで。
Huh? I turned to look at Arimura, surprised. I thought she was staying here because there might be another attack like last night.
ひなちゃん帰っちゃうの？もっと合宿していこうよ。明日学校お休みだし。
いやいや、宮代先輩のお父様にこれ以上ご迷惑をおかけするわけには。っていうか、ぶっちゃけこんなに泊まり込むと思ってなかったんで、下着の替えとかピンチでして。
そんな、別に遠慮しなくても。
おっと、ド変態め。限界を突破した下着を遠慮なく見せつけていいと？いや、むしろじっくり見せろと？一宿一般の恩義があろうと、そいつは聞けねえ要求だな。
This conversation has become weird. Arimura pressed down on the hem of her skirt.
誰がそんなこと要求するか、そういう話じゃないだろ。
じゃあ何ですか？
だから事件が終わったっていう確証が得られるまで有村もここにいないか。その方が安全だろ。
ああ、なるほど。
Arimura scratched her cheek, and then she took on a more serious look.
セリ、ウキ、悪いんだけど、ちょっとだけ外してくれないかな。
She spoke pointedly to Sarika and Yamazoe. The two of them exchanged glances for a moment, but Arimura wasn't allowing any room for discussion. They left the room.
はあ。
Once we were alone, Arimura sighed a little and took her phone out of her pocket.
宮代先輩に話っていうのは。
え？
つい今しがた、新庄さんからメールが来まして、私と先輩に大至急確認してほしいことがあるって。
新庄さんから？
すごく嫌なものを送りつけられました。デリカシーがないんでしょうね。大嫌いです、あの人。
Arimura expanded the attached image and looked away from the phone as she handed it to me.
それ、防犯カメラの映像のコピーだそうですよ。
What I saw in the video was the face of a woman I would never forget.
Minamisawa Senri.
My reaction was the opposite of Arimura's. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it.
間違いないですよね。じゃあ、新庄さんには先輩からそう言っといてください。私、あの人とはもう話したくないから。
ああ、わかった。これどこなんだろう。
Arimura seemed annoyed.
その女のマンションとかメールには書いてありましたけど。
マンションを見つけた？じゃあ南沢千里は逮捕されたのか？
I finally managed to tear myself away from the screen and look at Arimura. She shrugged a little.
ま、似たようなものです。だから私は家に帰っても平気になりました。お世話になりました、先輩。
It's not safe for you to go home yet, actually. They are so certain that Minamisawa is the one who's killing people. And I don't think it's her.
ウキも立花姉ももう安心していいみたいですよ。
どういうことだ？
死にました、その女。
は？
Arimura spoke without any real emotion in her voice.
死んだ？
ええ。クルス先輩にはうまく伝えてください。私、そういうの苦手なんで。
They haven't proven that she's dead yet. They're just going off of assumptions because it's a locked room mystery.
それじゃ、そういうことで、あとはよろしくです。
She grabbed the phone from my hands and quickly deleted the photo like it was something filthy. Then she bowed and left me alone in the dining room.
セリー、ウキ、話終わったよ。私帰るから、宮代先輩の相手してあげて。寂しがってるよ。
I could hear her voice from the hallway. I could also hear Serika, Yamazoe, Kurusu, and Yui all talking. They were probably all saying something like, "You're leaving at this hour?" But I didn't hear their conversation at all.
南沢千里が死んだ。
The serial killer who was after us is gone? The serial killer was serially killed, actually. According to this logic. October 27th, 2015, Tuesday. Haida Riko's condo was cut off from sunlight by the surrounding buildings, making the whole place feel somehow gloomy. Kunosato Mio was standing there, her eyes as cold as ever. She'd gone through all the wooden shelves and colored boxes on the walls, read every last document and receipt inside, and found nothing.
警察が持っていったものの中には本当に何もな。
ああ、俺が全部チェックしたんだ。間違いない。
Several days had passed since the death of the woman they believed to be Minamisawa Senri. The body had long since been taken out for an autopsy. A few pieces of evidence, like the table the body had been found on, had been taken by the police, but Shinjo said the clue she was looking for wasn't among them.
何も出てこない。無駄足だったのか。
She'd spent 2 hours searching the room. Even she was starting to feel a little concerned, but she shook her head to drive the thoughts from her mind. Next, she pulled out the magazines and manga from the shelf and began to check if anything was hidden between the pages.
なあ。
なんだ。
Shinjo was leaning up against the wall and watching her, a frown on his face.
この部屋は完全な密室だった。彼女以外誰も出入りした痕跡がなく、凶器の鉄筋も彼女自身が持ち込んだものだ。
それがどうした？
彼女はどうやって死んだんだろうな。自殺か他殺かも含めて。
私は探偵じゃない。密室犯罪のトリックなど知るか。
そういう話をしてるわけじゃない。ギガロマニアックスの死に関して君の意見を求めてるんだ。
Shinjo sounded unhappy as he turned to look at the spot where the burnt body had been found.
ギガロマニアックスはいわゆる超能力者とは違う。他人と妄想を共有することで初めて能力が発現する。つまりここが誰の目も届かない閉鎖空間だったのなら、南沢千里はただの人間と同じだ。パイロキネシスなど使えるはずがない。だがここは閉鎖空間とは違う。例えば窓の外から誰かが覗いていれば妄想の共有など簡単にできる。
いや、そこまでは俺も考えたさ。
なら何を悩むことがある。ここもダメか。
Kunosato finished checking all the bookshelves and looked around the room, uncertain what to do next. There wasn't a lot of furniture or appliances. The place was rather plain. A closet and desk were the first places she checked, but she still hadn't found what she was looking for.
ここに住んでいたのが南沢千里なら、例の委員会につながるヒントくらい出てくると思ったんだ。
Ah, the international conspiracy. The Committee of Zero.
あるいは奴らのことだ。私より先にすでに回収済みということか。くそ。だいたい事件の発生から時間が経ちすぎだ。直後にここを調べられたら連中を出し抜けたかもしれないのに。
She looked over her shoulder and glared at Shinjo. It took effort to stop herself from bitching him out.
上等だ。絶対に突き止めてやる。
Kunosato decided to search the whole room once more. All the paperwork inside the messy desk used the name Haida Riko. It was nothing but receipts and utility bills. But there was no sign of a bill for a phone or internet service. She'd had neither, it seemed. There was no sign of her even having a landline phone.
確かに。電話がどこにもないな。
She looked around the room and found the phone jack, but it was covered in dust and showed no signs of ever having been used. The only other things she found among the papers were receipts for food and a drink from a convenience store. Minamisawa Senri had never cooked. Convenience store food was all she ate.
これじゃあ食費もバカにならなかったろ。
How had she paid for it all? The police were trying their hardest to find out, but there was no sign of a bank book or credit card in the room, and they didn't know anything about her bank account either.
金の出所は委員会じゃないのか。せめて口座番号だけでも分かれば尻尾がつかめるもの。
南沢千里は23日の深夜から24日の未明にかけて宮代君たちの前に姿を現してる。
Cannot trust that.
そして焼死体となって発見されたのはその24日の夜だ。ということは彼女が死んだのはその間ということになる。
You would think that they would check CCTV, but I guess there just wasn't any around the Cafe LAX. Kunosato had been so lost in thought that she hadn't even realized Shinjo was talking to her.
は？なんだ？
南沢千里が最後に目撃されてから死体が発見されるまでに20時間ほどあるって話だよ。
それだけあれば十分だろ。
ところがその20時間の間に何が起こったのか、いやそもそも南沢千里が何をしていたのか足取りが全くつかめないんだ。彼女はこのマンションにすら戻ってきていないんだよ。
何
Kunosato's expression changed for the first time.
24日の防犯カメラに映ってないんだ。
そんなバカな話があるか。じゃあどうやってここで死んだんだ。
だからこうして途方に暮れてるんじゃないか。
Did she show up on another day? And that was the last day she was out of her apartment? That would make sense.
映像をチェックしたやつの見落としだろう。
俺も確認したよ。見落としはない。
Shinjo closed his eyes and rubbed them. He'd caused himself a good bit of eye strain.
今映像を確認させてるが、どういうことかさっぱりだ。
わかった。少し考えてみよ
う。助かる。
He covered his face with his left hand, exhausted.
それも含めて、私はもう少しこの部屋を調査させてもらう。あんたは南沢千里がいつどうやってハイダリコという偽の身元を手に入れたのか、もしかするとそれにも委員会が絡んでいるかもしれない。
それはもうやってる。
あとこの件の警察発表はいつになる予定だ？
まだ決まってない。いろいろ揉めてるらしい。
ニュースになればもっと南沢千里の情報が集まってくると思うんだがな。
気持ちはわかるが、そう焦るなよ。
わかる。
私の何がわかると言うんだ。
She glared daggers at him, but Shinjo shrugged and said nothing.
さてと、ちょっと飯でも食ってくる。君はどうする？
いらない。勝手にしろ。
じゃ、そうさせてもらう。
Shinjo left without trying to invite her a second time, but as he opened the door, he paused as if he'd remembered something.
どれだけ調べてくれても構わないが、マンションの管理人が君を疑ってる。本当に警察の関係者かって。所轄に問い合わせでもされたら厄介だから気をつけろよ。
一応気には留めておく。
一応じゃ困る。怒られるのは俺だ。
I really hate it when people say I guess after something like that, like you guess? I want some more surety. Especially if it's something that serious. Like, what the fuck? Well, I guess I'm gonna be careful. Like, ridiculous. So arrogant. And then she laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. Husky, what are you doing? I'm just gonna... It was after school in the club room, and the twilight streamed in through the open windows. Kazuki was in the corner playing ESO2 and making weird noises. Her battle didn't seem to be going well, and she was making oddly sexy noises. I hope no one outside the room got the wrong idea. I heard a small knock on the door.
ってお前もか。こそこそ覗いてないでさっさと入ってこい。
大丈夫？お邪魔じゃない？
だから何がお邪魔なんだよ。
廊下の向こうまで聞こえてるよ、花ちゃん。
今忙しいから話しかけるなってさ。
たくすごいね。花ちゃん検定があればすぐに1級とか取れるね。
そんなもんいらん。
私のことなんてどうでもいいのねって怒ってるぞ。
違う。私のこと勝手に話題にすんなだ。
Damn, he is an expert.
すごい。
Seneca smiled and clapped. She seemed really happy for some reason.
あれ、今日なんちゃんは？
生徒会。しばらく休んでたから仕事が溜まってるらしい。
川原のやつが来て、今日は新聞部には渡さないとさ。
おお、これは争奪戦だね。よーし、タク、のんちゃんを奪いに行こ
う。いや、いいよ。
I didn't want any more trouble with the student council. Or Kawaharu-kun, more specifically.
うわぁ、久しぶりにダメなタクに戻った。せっかくかっこよかったのに。
Damn.
なんだそれ。
だってあんな怖い能力を使う人と対決したり、病院の地下へ潜入したり、とにかく事件を追ってるタクはかっこよかったよ。
そうか。
Kurusu got super mad at me and told me not to go chasing after danger, though. Oh, okay. 90-second break. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. But now that all seemed like the distant past. Oh wait. I need the countdown back up. Streaming. It's 60, 90 minutes? 90 minutes. Right? Yeah. Even though it hadn't been a week since then. I got a small bag of chips I'm gonna be eating every now and then. That night, the 23rd, when there had been no murder, the rest of the world had started to declare that the return of the new gen madness was over. But it still hadn't believed it then. I thought that it wasn't over at all. But the next day, I'd heard shocking news from Shinjo-san. Minamisawa Senri, the woman who threatened our lives, was found burned to death in her condo.
センリが。
僕も有村も映像を確認した。間違いない。
I spent a long time thinking that night, but in the end, I had no choice but to tell Kurusu about her death. When I told her, her eyes went wide, and then she looked down silently. Her long hair hid her face, and I couldn't see her expression.
なんて言っていいかわからないけど、
これで。これで終わったのね。もうタクルやユイを襲うような犯人はいなくなったのね。
だと思うって新庄さんが。
そう。よかった。
She raised her head. Her eyes were a little wet, but she was quietly smiling. The police still hadn't made any announcement about a suspect in the killings being burned to death. Not only was Minamisawa Senri a minor, but she may have been driven to the crimes by chaos child syndrome, the form of PTSD experienced by young survivors of the Shibuya Earthquake. Shinjo-san had said it was an extremely delicate matter, and because the circumstances of her death were so strange, the forensics people were getting nowhere. There was an internal war over how the police should release the information. It seemed to me that the fact that she was a human test subject at 8H Tokyo General Hospital might have played a role too. If she became famous, the media and internet might start looking into her past, and they might find out about the human experiments. It would make sense if someone who wanted to avoid that was putting pressure on the police.
おい、宮代？
悪い。なんだ？
あれ、どうするよ？
Ito pointed to the map on the wall.
片付けるか？もう使わないかもしれないし。
I don't know about that. I stood in front of it again. The map was crammed with all the information we'd gathered so far. It all looked faded, like something that had happened a long time ago. I found 2 photographs on the map that I completely forgot about. The 6th and 7th incidents in the New Generation Madness, Finger Food, and Dokyun Puzzle. The notes next to them read October 28th and November 4th.
今日って28日なんだよな。
そうだな。
Ito nodded. He seemed to know what I meant. Then I saw another note I'd stuck up there in my own handwriting. It was one I'd been thinking about ever since I was told about Minamisawa Senri's death. Serial killer equal multiple people, including pyrokinetic.
事件は終わったんだろうか。本当に。
終わったって言ってるぜ、みんな。それにさ、もし他に犯人がいるなら、23日だって南沢千里に代わってそいつが事件を起こしたはずだろ。
ああ、なるほど。
けど実際は何も起こらなかった。ってことはこの可能性は消えたってことじゃないのかな。
Ito took the note off the map.
もうやめようぜ。なんつうかさ、副部長が辛いと思うんだ、俺。
そうだね。しんちゃんの言う通りかも。
ね。
そっか。
I remembered Kuru's sad eyes when I told her about Minamisawa Senri's death.
わかった。こいつの役目はここで終わりにしよう。
I slowly removed the map.
けど、なんかいきなり壁がすっきりしちゃったね。
ずっとここにあったからな。ね
え、また何か事件を探そうよ、タク。みんなをあっと驚かせるような事件。
ああ、そのために作った新聞部だもんな。
Sedika smiled again, the same way she always did. Nito finally started to grin too.
今度は副部長に怒られない程度の事件にしとこうぜ。
わかってるよ。今回の件でさすがに懲りた。
Even Kazuki turned away from her game and gave me an in agreement. That night, I finally went back to the RV. Yui had finally calmed down and stopped being afraid at night. If Dad, Kurusu, and Yuto were there, she'd probably be fine. Her old friend Yamazoe was there too.
やっぱりここは落ち着くな。
I sat in the chair and booted up my PC for the first time in a long while. My inbox was overflowing with spam. It was strange. It always used to annoy me, but now I felt like proof that I returned to my old life.
はい、ご苦労さん。
Of course, I deleted them all immediately, but they didn't piss me off like they used to.
さて。
Oh shit! Joe Biden just dropped out of the presidential race? Where were you when you learned that this happened just now? This is a moment in history. Who's gonna replace him? Is it gonna be Kamala Harris? It's probably gonna be Kamala Harris, huh? It's gotta be, because she's like the only other choice. That's wild. I didn't think he would actually drop out. Damn. Okay, well. That just happened. Rip the USA. No clue what's gonna happen. Anyway. Now then. Come to think of it, I'd forgotten because of everything that happened, but Yesa had just sold me the latest edition of Cool Cat Press, and I hadn't touched it at all. Oh, what if there's a sumo sticker in it, though, dude? You gotta be cautious. You gotta let other people open books for you from now on, so that you don't just have like you're not under psychic attack. That'd be really bad. I took it out from its hiding spot under my desk and started to flip through the pages. It felt like it'd been forever since I'd done that too.
1ヶ月目の恋人はどこまで許される？フレンチキス、それともディープキスまで OK。
You have to ask. The best way to know the answer to these questions is if you ask the other person. Oh, it's Seika.
なあ、尾上、お前はどう思う？てか、うわ！
Why is she there? I almost fell out of my chair. Seika was standing behind me, looking over my shoulder.
私としては1ヶ月とかあんまり関係ないと思うんだよね。
いやいやいや、そんなことよりお前いつの間に。
ドアの鍵かかってなかったから。
Crap. I've been so busy reading that I hadn't noticed Seika.
だからって勝手に入ってくんな。ノックくらいしろよ。え？
I didn't think you'd like it if I knocked. Yeah, he does have knock trauma.
タク、怖がるかなって。
She's right. If I hear knocking now, it might be bad for my heart. She might seem like an airhead, but the nice thing about Seika is that you can always count on her to remember things like that.
いいか、繰り返すようだが、この本はいつもゲンさんに押し売りされてるんだ。僕が好んで買ってるわけじゃないからな。そのあたり勘違いするなよ。
I put my cool cap press back under the desk in a very cool manner.
了解。のんちゃんには秘密にしとくね。
こら待て、僕はそういうこと言ってるんじゃないからな。
それでタコはどうなの？
何が？
だからキスはどこまで OK？
なんもしたこともないのにわかるか。
Seika suddenly pursed her lips unhappily.
タコってば忘れちゃったの？
何をだ？
私としたのに、そのファーストキス。
何？
I literally leapt out of my chair. I kissed Seika? What? When? Where? How? Why? According to Minamikato Kenji Sensei's column in Cool Cat Press, a girl's first kiss was more important to her than losing her virginity. Okay. And that's why a guy who didn't remember his first kiss was a terrible man, Pete said. He, huh? I was sweating, unable to remember a thing, but Seika just laughed.
まあ、許してあげるよ。幼稚園の頃の話だし。
ってそんな昔の話かよ。びっくりさせんな。
I mean, kisses in preschool don't count. Probably. But when I told her that, Seika looked upset again.
それより何しに来たんだ？家に帰ったんじゃないのか？
そうなんだけど、なんか少し寂しくなっちゃって、タクの顔を見に来たの。
は？
ほら、最近ずっとみんなで一緒にいたでしょ？もちろん怖い人に狙われたのはすごく嫌だったけど、それも仲間同士で助け合って乗り越えたって感じで。こういうこと言うとのんちゃんに怒られると思うから内緒だけど、私結構ドキドキしたよ。
そっか。
タクはどうだった？
僕か。僕はどうだろ わからないな。
She suddenly leaned over, right on top of me, and reached a hand toward my computer. The sensation of her body on my back was soft and warm. I didn't know how to react whenever she did something like this.
おい、重いからどけって。
重くないよ。失礼だな、君は。
Her white fingers gripped the mouse, and she started to move it around.
部室でも言ったけど、私、また新しい事件を探したいな。あ、これなんかどう
Sedika opened a site for explorers of abandoned buildings, a popular genre. Most of the articles were about people going into abandoned villages, factories, and mines. Bankrupted, empty amusement parks, and department stores were also popular. They would write essays and upload photos. Some sites would also write about... Hello, Miguel. How you doing? Thank you for stopping by. Some sites would also write about bloody urban legends involving the abandoned buildings or upload photographs with ghosts in them.
こういうのはやり尽くされてるしな。あと背景の侵入って非合法だから、学校の部活でやるのは無理だと思う。
I mean, technically you shouldn't have been breaking into a hotel room, so it's not like illegality is really a concern for you, huh?
つまんないな。
Sedika moved away from me and then laid down on the RV's bed. Then she yawned loudly.
ほら、そこで寝るなよ。
I turned around, but her eyelids were already closed.
早っ。
Many flags. I quickly stood up and shook her shoulders.
おい、眠いんなら帰って寝ろよ。
今日は泊まってくからいい。
何言ってんだ。僕の寝る場所がなくなるだろ。
大丈夫。私小さいからベッドで一緒に寝られるよ。
そんなわけいくか。
Just as I grabbed her by the arm and tried to lift her up. My phone started to vibrate in my backpack. It kept going, so it probably wasn't an email or a text, but a phone call. I had no choice but to leave Sedika on the bed while I went to answer it. What is... What does Zozobra mean? I looked at the screen and saw that the call was from Ito.
今頃なんだろう。新しい事件のネタでも見つけたのか？
I answered the phone.
もしもし、どうした伊藤？
アットちゃん見たか？
His voice was tense and anxious.
アットチャンネル？
とにかく見てみろ。
God...
ニュージェネ関連のスレならどこでもいい。
Goodbye. See you too.
なんだよ一体。
I walked over to my PC, confused, and opened Ad Channel. I decided to start by opening the news board. There were quite a few threads about the original and current New Gen Madness incidents. I couldn't believe my eyes. The page was filled with the names Minamisawa Senri and Haida Riko. And I could see the words burnt to death here and there too.
警察が犯人を公表したのか？
違う。読んでみるとわかるが、どっかから情報が漏れたらしい。
By the killer? It's probably leaked by the killer, honestly. Because the police weren't saying anything and they really want people to know what happened. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing all these sensationalized killings.
情報が漏れた。
I opened up a thread and saw that, yes, the police were still remaining silent. But there was the picture Arimura and I had seen of her on the security camera and a photo of her from when she was a student. And there was a ton of weird information on Minamisawa Senri with no source even given. Am I not gonna get a chance to look through this? Hello? Some of it said.
おい、なんだよこれ。
見つけたか?
No, they're not gonna let me read it?
くそ、情報弱者どもがろくに確かめもしないで何適当なこと書き込んでんだ。
Damn, I should have saved, huh? Should have saved before this? I was angry because I saw Kurusu and Kawahara-kun's names mixed in with the information on Minamisawa Senri. The first idiot who'd posted was probably no classmate of theirs. The three of them were friends and they were always together. That information had nothing to do with the case. What were they thinking? Oh! Stop! Stop scrolling! They don't usually do this. They usually let you just look through it. And the irresponsible comments that came after were even worse. Another thread said that Minamisawa had once lived in Aoba dorm and that Kurusu visited her every day in her condo. This was insane. There were even a few morons saying that Kurusu was an accomplice to the murders because she'd helped Minamisawa Senri stay hidden and that the police were coming to arrest her. That was probably why her phone number had shown up on a telephone harassment site. Oh!
ふざけるなよ。
When I saw that Kurusu's graduation photo was uploaded along with Senri's, I slammed my fist down onto the desk.
試験がやっと終わったっていうのに、何なんだよこれ。
Nope, they didn't let me. So, hold up. Let me pull up YouTube. YouTube. Let's go to the stream. And I will just show the